I've been on the force for over a decade and seen my fair share of horrors and gruesome crime scenes. You know, the typical having to respond to a stabbing or shooting. I've even had to witness an old woman's severed head staring back at me. But what happened last year? It's something I can't shake off. It was different. It was a cold, rainy night when dispatch called us to an old, dilapidated apartment building on the outskirts of town. The kind of place that seemed to absorb the darkness, making it feel colder and more unwelcoming than the weather alone could explain. We assumed it was just some kids messing around, so we approached pretty nonchalantly. When we arrived, the building was quiet, except for the sound of rain tapping on the windows and the distant wail of sirens. My partner Ramirez and I made our way to the apartment in question, Unit 23. The silence was very suspicious, not typically what you would expect from a disturbance call. We decided to be more careful as there was only two of us. The door was slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. I drew my gun, instincts on high alert. We entered cautiously, the flickering light of a broken bulb casting eerie shadows on the walls. The wallpaper was peeling off the walls, and some parts of the ceiling were caved in, and you could see into the floor above. The place looked much more abandoned from the inside than out. The air was thick with the smell of decay, as if something had died here a week ago. We progressed through the building, too afraid to announce ourselves. We cleared each room one by one, and in the living room, we found the source of the disturbance. A body lying in a pool of blood. The victim, a middle-aged man, had been brutally stabbed multiple times. It was a scene straight out of a horror movie. Ramirez had to look away and took a moment to compose himself, but I was used to it at this point. As we started our investigation, something caught my eye, a tape recorder on the coffee table. It wasn't a common sight in crime scenes, and curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. We huddled together to listen. A scratchy voice echoed through the room, recounting a mundane day, seemingly innocent. But as the recording progressed, the tone changed. The man's voice became desperate, panicked, as if he was being pursued by something unseen. Ramirez and I exchanged uneasy glances. The recording described bizarre occurrences, strange shadows, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and a feeling of being watched. The man's fear was palpable, his words painting a picture of a descent into madness. Then, the recording took a sinister turn. The man spoke of a dark figure, a presence that haunted his every step. He described the feeling of being followed, even in the seemingly mundane moments of his life. As the tape continued, the man's voice became increasingly unhinged. He spoke of the figure whispering to him, urging him to do unspeakable things. The final entry was a blood-curdling scream that sent chills down our spines. We searched the apartment for clues, but there was nothing to indicate who the man was or why he had become the victim of such a gruesome attack. The tape recorder, however, remained a haunting mystery. We assumed the guy had gone crazy and just stabbed himself, maybe some sort of junkie. Who knows? Months passed and the case went cold. But late one night, while going through evidence, I found the tape recorder tucked away in storage. Out of morbid curiosity, I played it one more time. This time, the voice on the tape wasn't the victim's, it was mine. The recording detailed my movements, my daily routines, and the darkest corners of my mind. The feeling of being watched settled over me, and I realized with horror that the guy didn't kill himself. It must have been someone, or something. I destroyed the tape quickly and tried to forget about it as fast as possible, but my mind would just keep racing, trying to figure out how the fuck my voice got on that recording. To this day, as I patrol the streets at night, I can't shake the feeling that something unseen is always watching. For the purposes of this story, due to safety reasons, my name is Officer Alvarez, and I've just recently retired with the Mexican Federal Police Force. Despite all the corruption in the force, I've always believed in the thin blue line, the unwritten code among officers to always do right and to protect and serve. This changed 10 years ago, however. It all started with a routine call about a disturbance in the industrial district in an unfamiliar part of town. Due to the fact that our department was underfunded and corrupt, I was the only one able to be dispatched at the time. I arrived at an abandoned warehouse, its windows shattered, and the moon casting eerie shadows across the graffiti-covered walls. My instincts tingled with an unspoken warning, but duty pressed me forward. As I cautiously stepped inside, the air was thick with tension. The sound of dripping water echoed through the cavernous space, creating an unsettling rhythm. My flashlight revealed discarded crates and dusty machinery, but nothing more. The place was pretty huge, so I decided to keep searching. As I ventured deeper, I stumbled upon a clandestine meeting, a group of 3 well-dressed men huddled in a dimly lit room. The low hum of their conversation paused as they turned their eyes toward me the moment I shined my flashlight their way. I recognized the cold glint in their eyes, the unmistakable stare of cartel members. "What the hell are you doing here, officer?" spat a man with a scar cutting across his cheek, his tone laced with menace. "Just responding to a call," I replied, trying to maintain composure. The tension in the room thickened as they exchanged knowing glances. I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the unspoken message that I had crossed an invisible line. Usually this would go one of 2 ways in my country. Either I would be forced to turn a blind eye and potentially take a bribe, or stand up to them and risk having a shootout with 3 guys that have home field advantage. "Officer, this is none of your business. You should leave," another man warned, his words dripping with veiled threat. I was more than ready to leave, but upon ignoring his command, I continued to scan the room, my flashlight revealing something that sent shivers down my spine. A room adjacent to us concealed a makeshift morgue, body bags neatly lined up like a grotesque assembly line. Seeing this filled me with guilt and reminded me that I have a duty to fulfill. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice more forceful than I intended. The scarred man chuckled darkly. "You stumbled upon something you shouldn't have, officer." As they closed in, I realized the gravity of the situation. These were not just ordinary criminals. These guys seemed important. Panic set in, and I instantly regretted sticking around, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I knew I was too deep in to leave now, as the moment I turned my back, I would most certainly end up with a bullet hole in the back of my skull. "You're in over your head, officer. This is the last warning," the scarred man growled, his hand obviously hovering over a concealed weapon. Before I could react, a sudden explosion of gunfire echoed through the warehouse. Shadows danced as bullets tore through the air. I ducked behind a crate, catching glimpses of the chaos unfolding. I soon realized that no bullets were landing anywhere in my direction. It must have been a turf war, a violent clash between rival factions. Amidst the mayhem, I glimpsed a figure in the shadows, an informant I had once protected. His eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement that he had betrayed the very people he had once allied with. I recognized him by the tattoo on the right side of his face. As the rival factions fought, I seized the opportunity to slip away, leaving the warehouse behind. I sprinted to my car as fast as possible and hit the gas. The echoes of gunfire faded into the distance, replaced by the haunting realization that I had witnessed a power struggle beyond my understanding. On my way back, I began to realize how lucky I was that I got a get-out-of-jail-free card. I began to think of my children, and my eyes started to tear up when it dawned on me that this could have been the day where I never get to see them again. In the aftermath, I heard rumors that all 3 of the guys were killed, as well as several other rival gang members. However, one day when I was out on a routine patrol on foot with my colleague, let's just call him Alfredo, I got unexpectedly shot at from across the street. Now, this has happened to me before about 5 or 6 times, but this time it was different. We both huddled behind a car parked at the side of the road and returned fire. As I was reloading my sidearm, I heard the shooter shout my name. "Alvarez, you motherfucker, you're dead." This made me pause for a second, as I didn't realize I had any enemies. In between the volleys of shots, I assumed the shooter was reloading, so I set myself up on the hood of the car, waiting for him to peek from wherever he was shooting from. The moment I saw him peek from behind a wall in front of someone's house, I shot a burst of bullets right at him. He dropped dead in his spot. We quickly rushed over to see if the threat had been neutralized, and there he was. The guy with the facial scar from the warehouse incident that everybody said is dead, barely recognizable with his brains all over some poor person's front lawn. Questions immediately began flooding in. How did he get my name? Has he been following me this whole time? And did he know my family? This was really the straw that broke the camel's back, and since that day I changed my approach to policing. I became the typical corrupt cop that took bribes from everyone out of fear of losing my family, or my family losing me. It just simply wasn't worth it to me anymore. Whatever you may think of me, I did my part as a cop for the better part of my career, but at some point my family had to come first.